Okay, so...
You may want to wait a couple of minutes. We're a bit early.
Oh, is it?
Yes, still a bit early.
Oh, you're right.
I know it's people always coming the last minute.
Yeah. On behalf of the School of Arts and Sciences and Penn Engineering, I am very pleased to welcome you to today's lecture by Moshe Vardi, From Logic to Technology and Back, the 10th in a series that is sponsored by the Thomas and Yvonne Williams Fund for the Advancement of Logic and Philosophy. We are most grateful to the generosity and vision that Tom and Yvonne have shown in establishing the fund that supports this series and that makes possible other educational activities at the university. It was a great pleasure to work with Tom when I first arrived at Penn, and to watch him develop through the study of logic and philosophy that clarity of mind which he has so successfully brought to bear in the sphere of practical affairs, and that sustains his ongoing mission for the ongoing passion for the life of the mind. And it remains a great pleasure to work with him now on a range of activities that will advance a general appreciation of the power of reason to clarify problems, both practical and theoretical. And now I'm delighted to invite my colleague Rajiv Allur to introduce Moshe. Thank you.
It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Professor Moshe Vardi. He is Karen Ostrom George Distinguished Professor of Computational Engineering at Rice University. So Moshe's research is focused on logical foundations of computer science, and over the last many decades, his work has made fundamental contributions to many fields such as database theory, computational complexity, and computer-aided verification. More recently, Moshe has also been leading community efforts in connecting computer science with society at large and looking at issues in ethics in computer science. And he's leading an initiative in technology, culture, and society at Rice University. Moshe has a long list of awards. Let me just mention a couple. He's the winner of 2020 Alan Newell Award for Logical Foundations of Computer Science, and 2020 Knut Prize for seminal contributions to foundations of computer science. He's member of National Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Engineering, and his list of awards goes on and on. He has also made a great impact in computer science by reinvigorating the communications of DACM, where he served as the editor-in-chief for many years. I have known Moshe actually for many, many years. So actually going back to 1990, when I was a PhD student, my first internship was at IBM Almaden Research, where Moshe was mentor, and he has been my mentor since then. So let's welcome Moshe.
Thank you, Rajiv, for this kind introduction. Thank you, Scott, for being patient, and we worked on scheduling and rescheduling and rescheduling, I don't know how many times, till I'm finally here. And thanks to Mr. Williams and to the Williamses for sponsoring this lecture series. And thanks you all for coming today. So I want to talk about logic and technology. But if we want to talk about logic and technology, you all know technology, but maybe you don't know exactly what is logic. It's not so easy to define logic. So logic goes back to more than 2,000 years ago, when the Greek wanted to distinguish between philosophy, which literally philosopher literally means lover of wisdom. Hopefully we're all philosophers here because we love wisdom. And demagoguery, what is a demagogue? Demagogue literally means leader of the people. Dema is the people and Gog is the leader. So even the Greeks had very low opinions of politicians a long time ago. Francis Bacon, I think, put it very nicely. Logic is different from rhetoric in this, that logic handles reason exact and in truth. And rhetoric handles it, it is planted in popular opinions and manners. So rhetoric is about populism, and logic is about truth. That's what logic is about. It's the search for truth. When Aristotle started looking into logic in the 4th century BC, and he published, it shows up in his book called Organon, Tools for Thinking, he discovered the syllogism, which are forms of reasoning. So here is the classical syllogisms. All humans are mortal. All Greeks are human. Therefore, all Greeks are mortal. Yeah, surely you have no doubts about the correctness of this argument. Let's look at the next one. All bujums are slizy. All tovs are bujums. Therefore, all tovs are slizy. Now, you probably have never seen a bujum, and you're not sure what is a tov, and you have no idea why they are slizy, but you recognize that this must be equally valid reasoning. Why? Because it has the same form. And this is an astounding discovery. The truth can come out of form, because we all think the truth is about the inside, the inherent stuff. Ignore the form. No, truth can come out of form. And this was the discovery. That's why we talk about formal logic and formulas, because we're interested sometimes in the form. Logic doesn't tell us whether it's raining outside or not, but it handles with more complex assertions by analyzing their form. So this all happened in the 4th century BC. The Greeks also discovered the paradoxes. Paradoxes are tools to sharpen the mind. The most famous paradox are the liar's paradox. Usually we attribute it to Epimenides, a Cretan who said all Cretans are liars. And in fact, you can find in the Epistle of St. Paul to Titus 1:12, one of themselves, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. He really didn't like the Cretans. But to really get the paradox, you have to sharpen it. And this is due to Eubulides, who came up with the formulation, this sentence is false, or I'm a liar. And is this sentence true or not? If it's true, it must be false. If it's false, it must be true. And this cannot be resolved. That's what makes it a paradox. And the key feature is this sentence talks about itself. When I say I'm a liar, I talk about myself. And this ability to have self-reference, you can see it's a very fundamental. There's room.
I'm not sure if I'm in the right place.
It's a free country. So we'll see self-reference comes again and again. Now, Eubulides invented other paradoxes. And the one that is less well known than the last paradox, but I think maybe even more important, is the sand heap paradox. What is the idea here? Suppose I take 1 grain of sand and I put it down here. It's a grain of sand. It's not a heap of sand, right? Nobody would say this is a heap. Let's add another grain of sand. 2 grains of sand. It's not a heap. We all understand if I keep doing it, eventually I will get a heap of sand. When does it become a heap? Clearly, if you take something which is not a heap of sand and you add 1 grain, it cannot become a heap. So induction fails here, because I can prove to you by induction it will never become a heap. We all know eventually it will become a heap. And why is that? Because there is something here in common to both of them. When we talk about truth, we assume absolute truth. When we talk about heap, we assume something is either a heap or it's not a heap. It's absolute. And we see that absoluteness leads to paradoxes. And we'll come back to the Stanley paradox later on. Now I'm going to jump more than 1,000 years to a Catalan monk, Ramon Llull. Was interesting in using logic to convert the whole world to Christianity. So here is a very compelling argument in favor of the Holy Trinity. Listen very carefully. If there are three properties or no differences, then the demonstration would give the D to the H of the A with the F and the G as it does with the E, and the K would not give significance to the H of any defect in the F or the G. But since diversity is shown in the demonstration that the D makes of the E and the F and the G with the I and the K, therefore the H has certain scientific knowledge of thy holy and glorious Trinity. Capish? Well, we can make fun of Llull, but Llull actually, these symbols stand for something else. And Llull realized that when you do logical reasoning, you have case analysis and you have many, many cases to consider. We have the exponential blow-up. You didn't have the theorem, but really you have to create many combinations. And he thought of using you have this diagram, but they're supposed to be circle, and you can rotate them. By rotating them, you get different combinations. So this, if you want, very primitive kind of computer to generate many, many combinations. Now, again, it was very primitive, but nevertheless, it was the first time that somebody came up with mechanical aid to reasoning. People had mechanical aid to computation before. Abaci are old, but this was the first time somebody proposed mechanical aid to reasoning. And this idea of mechanical aid to reasoning went on to inspire someone else, which is Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Leibniz is known for his co-invention of the calculus together with Isaac Newton, but he also invented binary notation. So you can say he invented the bits. Leibniz is very special to me because if you trace my what we call academic genealogy, my advisor, Catriel Be'eri, his advisor, Eli Shamir, Igor, Shmuel Agnon, Sholem Mandelbrot, Adamar, Picard, Darboux, Chassel, Poisson, Lagrange, Euler, Bernoulli, Leibniz. So he is my godfather, so to speak. Now, Leibniz was known to be a prodigy, and he taught himself Latin at age 8, he started reading Aristotle in Latin translation at age 12, and he wrote 2 theses about Aristotelian studies, metaphysics and logic in the law, and he discovered Llull. And he discovered this idea that you can use mechanical aid to reasoning. And that was really kind of, for him, a profound discovery, and he dreamed that one day we'll develop a universal mathematical language in which you can express all human knowledge. He called it lingua characteristica universalis. And there will be calculational rules, calculus ratius in nato, reasoning calculus, carried out by machine to derive of logical relationships. So he thought reasoning can be mechanized. Now, of course, during Leibniz's time, remember, Leibniz is living in the 17th, early 18th century. This is very far from having mechanizing reasoning, but Leibniz thinks one day we'll be able to mechanize reasoning. Now we have to wait about 100 years, and we come with George Boole, who described of a man of acutest intellects and manifold learning. I love this title. If you have any influence, make sure it's written on my grave. George Boole writes, in 1854, a book. And the book is about mathematical logic. He takes logic, which was until then was part of philosophy, and he mathematizes it. He makes it into mathematical discipline. Why? Because he goes all the way to the syllogism and says, really what's happening there, when we talk about Greeks and mortals and human, these are classes of objects. And then when we talk about properties, they're all classes of objects. White stands for white things. Sheep stands for sheep things. And when we say white sheep, we take the intersection of the white things with the sheep thing. An intersection is very similar to product. And disjunction is very similar to addition. So if you take this operation, conjunction, disjunction, negation, these are all logical operations we use commonly in natural language, you get what we call today Boolean algebra. So now we took logic, which was really philosophy all the way down to the 19th century, and now Boole says we can treat it mathematically, algebraically. The 19th century is the century of algebraic things, coming up with, oh, let's look at all associative operations. Well, these are groups. Groups are when you have groups, associative operation, or semi-groups, you have just associative operation. If you have associative operation with inverse, that's a group, and so on and so forth. Now, again, this is part of philosophy, now it's part of mathematics. But in the 20th century, we run into a young researcher, Claude Elwood Shannon. Unlike many other people, he lived long life. Most of the people in this story die young, miserable, or both. But Shannon is one of the people you see, he lived well into his 80s. And in 1937, so Shannon is 21, so you may have heard of Shannon in the connection of information theory. He wrote that when he was quite old, about 30. Okay? At age 21, he wrote a master thesis, a symbolic analysis of relay and switching circuits. And Shannon realized, look at the circuit, a switch can be on or off. This is like true and false, 0 and 1, okay? And you can connect circuits in series. And then you need both, the current, they both have to be open to connect, and that's an AND operation. Or you connect them in parallel, and that's the OR operation. So Shannon realized that Boolean logic described electrical circuits. That was an astounding discovery. There's some debate whether he was the first one to discover it, but definitely he was the most well-known. Howard Gardner, a psychologist at Harvard, wrote about this, but possibly the most important, also the most famous master thesis of the century. So already you see how we go from logic to technology. Now, when we say mathematical logic, there is some ambiguity. What Boole has done is brought mathematics into logic. But you can also think what will happen if we bring logic into mathematics. We use the phrase mathematical logic in both connections. Maybe one should be called logical mathematics, but we use the phrase mathematical logic for both. And to start the next one, which is bringing logic into mathematics, I'll start with Eugene Wigner, who wrote a very famous paper in 1960 on the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences. And he pointed out that people always wonder why mathematics is so successful. Kepler wrote, the laws of nature are but the mathematical thoughts of God. Galileo, the universe cannot be read until we have learned the language and become familiar with the characters in which it is written. It is written in the mathematical language. If you do in the physical sciences, clearly you use mathematics as your language. Physics, chemistry, mathematics is your language. And in fact, Wigner goes to formulate what he called the empirical law of epistemology. The mathematical formulation of the laws of nature is both appropriate and accurate. Mathematics is the correct language to formulate the laws of nature. And we don't question it today. You go into study physics 101, it's all about mathematics. You go to study many engineering disciplines, all about mathematics. But Einstein already wondered about this. He said, how can it be that mathematics, being after all a product of human thought, which is a pen of experience, is so admirably appropriate to the objects of reality? Now, this is actually a subject of debate. Is mathematics invented or discovered? One can give a whole talk just on this question. Is mathematics discovered or invented? But the other question is, what's so special about math? Why do we want to use mathematics as the universal language for the sciences? And again, Einstein, one reason why mathematics enjoys special esteem above all other sciences is that its propositions are absolutely certain, indisputable. Okay? There should be no failure of replicability in mathematics. You publish a proof, maybe people find an error in the proof, but if it's a proof, it's a proof. It's a high road. Proofs are the high road to truth. Proofs are very, very special objects. No other discipline, in this sense, like theoretical computer science can be viewed as a branch of mathematics, no other discipline has this high road to truth. On paper and pencil, you establish truth. But then people start asking, wait a minute, do we know exactly what is a proof? And your concept of a proof probably goes back, first of all, to geometry. Because when you were in high school, you learned plane geometry, which was very deductive. So that you learn about proofs. And then they gave you all kind of recipes for calculus. There were recipes. And it was just shut up and compute. Okay? Just do it. Don't ask us. It was not clear. They say, what is derivative? Well, take a very, very tiny interval. Okay? What is it? Now, in the 19th century, there was a reversal to both disciplines. First of all, people discovered non-Euclidean geometry, which meant that the axiom of geometry was somewhat arbitrary. In fact, there are really no planes. Where do you find planes? Not on this planet. Everything is, we have a globe. Well, unless you belong here. Any member of the Flat Earth Society? But so the axioms are somewhat arbitrary. And finally, in the 19th century, a sequence of mathematicians figured out how to make calculus rigorous in terms of limits. And limits is all about the infinite. So now, what happened? We're trying to say, no. Calculus is also rigorous, but we have snuck in the concept of infinity into the very foundation of calculus. You can't do calculus unless you believe in infinity, so to speak. And this is problematic because infinity has been a very philosophically suspect topic for a long time. Aristotle said, infinitum actu non datur. There's no actual infinity. Yes, you can keep counting, but you just get larger and larger numbers. But where do you see infinitely many numbers? In St. Augustine, in the 4th century, said, what do you mean? God is looking from his or her vantage point and can see all the numbers. So God said there are infinitely many numbers. So this almost became a theological debate about the infinity. And then, to make things worse, in 1874, Georg Cantor publishes a proof. There are infinitely many distinct infinities. And this now, it's a mind blower. Not only there is infinity, infinitely many distinct infinitives. And mathematicians objected now. It wasn't just theological debate. The question was, is this real mathematics? Gauss, I protest above all the use of infinite quantity as a completed one, which in mathematics is never allowed. Verboten, not allowed. Kronecker, when he saw the Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem, obvious sophism, he called it. This is not mathematics. Hilbert loved it. No one shall be able to expel us from the paradise that Cantor created for us. To this very day, some people refer to set theory as the Cantorian paradise, kind of building on this quote by Hilbert. And so now people have discovered that mathematics has proofs. But proofs were not treated mathematically. Proof floated somehow above mathematics. Mathematician has not subject the concept of proof to a mathematical investigation. And in the late 19th century, people said this is unacceptable. We have to make sure that we have rigorous foundation for mathematics. And here you see Friedrich Ludwig Gottlob Frege, who was called by some people the second most important logician after Aristotle. And so what Frege has done is started a school of thought called logicism. And he says that the foundation of mathematics is logic. And in one particular question was, what is the language of mathematics? And Frege essentially formulated a logic that today called first-order logic. So you have objects, like numbers. You have predicates, relationships between them, like 2 is less than 3. You have operations on them, functions, 2 plus 3. You have the logical operations of bool, and, or, not. And at this point, already people have discovered a quantifier, which we use in natural language. We say for all, there exists, these are described quantities. So these are called quantifiers. And so now you can go back to all the way to Aristotle when he says all men are mortal. What does it mean? For all x, if x is a man, then x is mortal. And now we have a notation. We use the inverted A to say for all. So now we say for all x, man of x means x is a man, implies, arrow implies, x must be mortal. So now we have a language for mathematics. But then, just before he goes about to publish his second book, Frege received a letter from a young British philosopher, Bertrand Russell. And the letter starts very nicely, and I can imagine that Russell reading it, and he's pretty pleased with himself. I find in agreement with you in all essentials. I find in your work discussion, distinction, definition, that one seeks in vain in the work of other logicians. Just one point where I've countered a difficulty. Well, this minor difficulty that Russell found was really a demonstration that Frege's framework was inconsistent. He found a contradiction in Frege's work. And Frege was not amused. In the books goes to the printer. He didn't stop it, he had an appendix where he wrote, there's nothing worse can happen to a scientist than to have the foundation collapse just as the work is finished. I've been placed in this position by a letter by Mr. Bertrand Russell. So what was the little difficulty that Russell found? It's known today as Russell's paradox. And what Russell realized that the central concept in Frege's treatment is the concept of set, which is a collection of objects. In some sense, one of the most simple mathematical concept, just a bag of things, a collection of things. And then you can ask, when you have a set, does it contain itself or not? And then what happened to the set of all sets that do not contain themselves as members? Is this a set or not? Now this sounds like a mouthful, but really it shows that Frege's system was inconsistent. We have a paradox here, and why is that happening? Self-reference. Remember self-reference, the last paradox? It's really one formalization of the last paradox. So you can say that Eubulides has spoken from his grave after a slumber of 2,000 years, and Russell has become known as the Grundlagenkrise, the foundational crisis. Suddenly we have mathematics, and the very basic concept in mathematics is that a set itself is, we find paradoxes right there. So this is very disturbing. Before that we had questions, now we have much worse than questions. We have paradoxes at the heart of mathematics. And Russell said, okay, I'm going to fix it. And he worked together with Whitehead, Alfred Whitehead, and they published a monumental work, Principia Mathematica. It took them 10 years to do it. They published it between 1910 and 1913, but they worked about it for a decade. 3 volumes, 2,000 pages, systematic derivation of mathematics from logic while avoiding all the paradoxes using type theory, essentially. Now, Russell himself wrote, my own intellect never quite recovered from the strain of writing it, and he stopped doing logic after that. I always tell there's a moral here for PhD students. 1, don't take 10 years. 2, don't write 2,000 pages. And now Russell supposedly solved the crisis, but people said, wait a minute, Frege had a small book, and Russell found a paradox. Now we have 2,000 pages. Who many knows how many paradoxes are hiding between the lines of Principia Mathematica? So at this point, we meet David Hilbert, who around the turn of the century is the big mathematician, the king of the hill, so to speak. We'll meet one more. Today, we don't have anyone of similar stature. And there are many stories, legendary stories, about Hilbert. So Hilbert finds this situation unacceptable for him to have these questions about the soundness of mathematics. After World War I has ended, he said, okay, we have to do something about it, and he launched what became known later, he called it, other people call it, Hilbert's program, where he said, we need to really formalize mathematics, put it on solid foundation. We have to show mathematically it is consistent, there are no paradoxes. He wants more, it is complete. Every mathematical question can be answered. And Here you see a little of computer science. It is decidable. There's a mechanical way to decide what is true and what is false. What is mechanical way? Think how you solve questions in certain question in algebra, let's say linear equations. You have a way to do that, and you just basically run an algorithm to solve it. How do you solve quadratic equation? You have an algorithm to do it. He said we should be able to do it for all of mathematics. And he invents something that was missing before. I mentioned to you that proof was something that's floating around, but we never formalized them. So Hilbert says we have to have a theory of proof theory. Now, this happens now after World War I, and here enters the picture the Vienna Circle, which I'll talk very little about. I'll just mention it a little bit. A book came out in 2017. The blurb described a dazzling group biography of the early 20th century thinkers who transformed the way the world thought about math and science. And the translation is, I think, superb. So you have to think what happened in the United States in 2017, who was president, exact thinking in demented times. To me, it's an amazing title. And one of the young members of the Vienna Circle was Kurt Gödel. And Gödel shattered Hilbert's program. Because one, he showed that the issue of completeness, no, mathematics cannot be complete. He showed that once a theory becomes powerful enough, for example, arithmetics, you can write a sentence that says, I'm not provable, and therefore, if you prove it, you get a contradiction, so you cannot resolve it. And this was called the first completed theorem, and then he showed even more powerful, you cannot prove the consistency of mathematics mathematically. Once you have a powerful enough theory, it cannot prove its own consistency. And the third leg, which was decidability, was shattered a few years later by Church and Turing independently, showing that the question which sentence in first-order logic is valid, is true, cannot be decided by mechanically. Of course, for this, you have to develop a theory of commutability. This is where commutability theory was partly born, but the result was negative. So all the three legs, remember the three legs of Hilbert's program, everything was destroyed. Cannot happen. It was a very ambitious dream, unrealizable completely. I mean, it ended up also, Nazism is rising to power around this time, so it was kind of and the Vienna Circle disintegrated partly again because of the rise of Nazism. Now here is, I promised someone a shattering thing about Gödel. This is his scorecard. This is his report card, and he gets sehr good, which is very good in all topics except for mathematics. Mathematics was only good, not very good. I just get a real kick from this report card. So let's dig a little bit about the incompleteness theorem. So there was a conference in Königsberg. Königsberg today was part of Prussia. Today it's Kaliningrad. It's a small enclave of Russia between Poland and Lithuania. The conference on the epistemology of the exact sciences. And there is a panel. And Gödel says, one may in fact exhibit sentences which, although intentionally correct, meaning true, are not provable in the formal system of mathematics. And his example was when he published the paper is the sentence said that say I'm not provable, and again the feature is self-reference. And von Neumann was there, and von Neumann was always the smartest man in the room. And when he heard Gödel realize, well, there are some exceptions to that, and he decided to quit logic. He said, "That's it, I'm done with logic." He didn't quite keep the promise, but then at this point he leaves logic. So what happened in the 1930s? That computer science is born really before there are computers. Because the answer to the question, what is a proof? A proof is evidence that is so precise and so rigorous that it can be checked mechanically. Coming up with a proof requires creativity, sometimes amazing creativity. But checking the proof should require no creativity. And of course, for this you have to say what is machine checkable. You have to define computability. So computer science was born out of the ruins of Hilbert's program. the notion of an algorithm, the distinction between hardware and software. You have a true machine, you have the instructions that you can write on the tape, the concept of universal machine. All was developed out of foundational questions in mathematics by mathematicians who were not thinking at all about building computers. So they was purely theoretical. But very soon people will build computers, because these are the 30s that are the decade the Nazis are coming to power, and pretty soon there's going to be World War, and there are various motivations to need to do computing, to break codes, to compute ballistic tables. And the ENIAC was a machine, was built here at the Moore School, here at Penn, and it was started it was supposed to compute ballistic tables for naval guns. And here you see Betty Jennings and Francis Bilas. I'm afraid I don't know who is who. They're programming the ENIAC. The ENIAC was not a stored program computer. To program it, you had to, you see here, set switches and connect cables. And it required a degree, it required such precision and patience to do it, and one switch wrong, the whole thing would not work. At the time, only women were precise enough and patient enough to do it. So all the programmers in the early days were women. Only later, programming became easy, and then men took over. And now we come back to von Neumann. So I told you that Hilbert was the king of mathematics, and there was one king after him, which was John von Neumann. And we saw him here quitting logic in 1930. Now we're about 15 years later. He's down in the United States, and he has done everything. It's just hard to imagine find someone who has done work in mathematics across all different areas of mathematics, in physics, in economics, game theory. He's one of the people who invented game theory, and in computing and statistics. Just an amazing thing. And also, he wasn't just a pure mathematician. He was involved in the Manhattan Project, in doing the computational part of Manhattan Project. It was his responsibility. Now, the ENIAC was turned on in February 15, 1946. It was amazing engineering accomplishment. It was a monster, and it was an amazing machine. But it was built by Eckhart and Mockley. They were engineers. They engineered the machine. And von Neumann happened to join the project almost by accident in August 44. He was standing in a train station. Somebody comes and tells him about the project. He says, I want in. And no one could say no to John von Neumann. So he's in. But the machine is already designed at this point. It just had to be built. So von Neumann started to think about the next one. And this is where he thought of what we call the stored program computer. And in June 45, he published the first draft of a report on the EDVAC and a year-long design of electronic computing instrument. Now, he's one of the few people. Usually, what happens in computing, we'll say people will develop technology, and we don't foresee what are the consequences of this technology. Von Neumann was very well aware. He said, what we're creating now is a monster whose influence is going to change history, provided there's any history left. And this is in 1945, where the only machine that was built was the ENIAC. It's quite amazing how far ahead he could think. Now, the ENIAC has one big problem, vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes are just like incandescent bulbs. If you're still using incandescent bulb, they burn out. Now, they burn out even more if you switch them on and off. And what happens when you have a computer? You switch things on and off. So they all the time have a problem that the vacuum tubes will burn out and they have to replace them. It was clear that this technology was not scalable, that you have to be able to go beyond vacuum tubes. And that next step happened in 1947, December 23, 1947, John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley demonstrated the transistor. So this is the date not of conceiving, but actually demonstrating the transistor to Bell Lab executive, and they said this can replace the vacuum tube as a switching element of the computer. This is such a monumental moment in the history of technology that Bill Gates said once, my first stop on any time travel expedition would be Bell Labs in the summer 1947. Now, 47, they invented transistor. Now it takes a while to be able to produce them in a reliable way and build a computer using transistors. And the first transistor-based computers was the TRADIC, Transistor Digital Computer. It was built by Bell Labs, by Gene Felker and Charles Brown for the US Air Force. Was manufactured, was functional in 1954. And by 1960, it became commercial because IBM came up with the IBM 360, which was the first commercially available transistor-based computer. That changed history. Once you have transistor, people discover you can make them smaller and smaller and smaller and come they're denser and denser and denser, which we call Moore's law. And so now it's just a matter of time till you can put enough transistor on a chip to have a CPU on a chip. And in 1971, Intel releases the Intel 4004, which was a 4-bit CPU. Okay? Here you see a picture of the 4004. And once you have a CPU on a chip, it's not very far. You can build a mini computer, a small computer, using this CPU. And so by 1975, there is the first microcomputer, the Altair 8080. It has a memory of 256 bytes, okay? No keyboard, no screen. It was ordered by some company as a mail order kit. They wasn't sure what you can do with it. So they said, it has manifold uses. We cannot even think at this time. And they really couldn't think at that time how to do that. But that machine was enough for Bill Gates and Paul Allen to find macro-soft. So that's how they called the company at the beginning, software for microcomputer. You can imagine how this will be a source of endless jokes, which is why they dropped the hyphen there and make it Microsoft instead of Microsoft. And their first product was to write a basic interpreter for the Altair. And how Microsoft got into operating system business, it's a whole other story, but it was almost accidental because they had no operating system. The first operating system they bought from someone else and sold to IBM. Now, the IBM PC that came up in 1981 was an astounding success. It came up in August of 1981. And by January of 1983, Time magazine, that usually have on the first issue of the year, it has Person of the Year. Time magazine put the PC, the IBM PC, on the cover, and they call it the Machine of the Year. The computer moves in. So this was really an astounding success. And in fact, we had a march of one thing after the other, and even something you probably may not know about. The smartphone was invented by IBM. In 1994, IBM released the IBM Simon, the Simon Personal Communicator. It has touch screen, it could send emails and faxes, calendar, address book, native appointment scheduler. There was two problems with it, okay? There was not yet very good cellular coverage around the country, so you couldn't always connect, and as usual, battery life. So we had to wait almost more than 20 years before Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone in 2007. And again, the innovation here was not the concept, but first of all, the execution, the nice package. And by 2007, we had enough. Battery life was an issue. Cellular coverage was OK. So this really changed the world, this product. Now, in parallel to this, to the hardware getting smaller and smaller so we can put today a computer in our breast pocket, there was the development of the communication infrastructure, the internet. So internet started as a DARPA project. In fact, it was used to be called ARPANET, way back. It was called the ARPANET. And it was only to enable different institutions that had DARPA contracts to communicate with each other. And then it went on, first of all, adopted TCP/IP. It was only in the 80s, adopted TCP/IP as infrastructure. In 89, Tim Berners-Lee had the vision of the World Wide Web and the protocol to support it. Then the internet becomes commercial. So now, before that, it was only a government-owned network. there was a period we called NSFNet, then it became internet, became commercial. Google was founded, Facebook was founded, and today there are more than 6 billion smartphone users in the world. Become just incredibly ubiquitous and pervasive technology. But very soon we discovered that we have a problem with so much communication. So if you go back to when I say now the internet, I just don't mean the infrastructure, because most of us rarely think about the infrastructure of the internet. It just happens, okay? We think about the ecosystem of the internet. To understand the ecosystem of the internet, you have to go back to the 1980s, where there was like the first social network, the Well bulletin board in the Bay Area, Usenet, Unix to Unix network. Again, very early social network, only for Unix users, so only in academia. But the underlying culture was the culture of the so-called of the 70s, and it was the hippie movement. And because of the Vietnam War, there was a whole culture of anti-establishment. And out of this anti-establishment came the mantra, information wants to be free. So when the web is invented by Tim Berners-Lee, his thinking is unfettered public sharing of information. All should be free. In the early days, it was exhilarating. You know, information before you had to go to the library and look for information. You know, when I was a student in Israel and I wanted to look at opportunity in the United States, you couldn't go to the web and find it. You had to go to the American embassy, and they have a special library for graduate program in the United States. You couldn't just go and find it easily. But pretty soon we have too much information. We're drowning in information. How do you find information? So the first solution was, how do you find books in the library? There's a catalog. Let's build a catalog for the internet. So a company came, Yahoo, was a major internet company, said, we'll build a catalog for the internet, a directory for the internet. But internet grew so fast, it didn't scale. So what's the next step? The next step is search engines. And early ones were not good. Then we got good search engines, Google. But Google had a problem. It was very good, very successful. How do they make money? Remember, information wants to be free. So what does Google say? How does TV work? Advertising. Let's do advertising. And then they realized that online advertising is not very effective. If you do big banners, the way newspapers get your attention, you pay a lot of money, you can get a full page advertisement. They tried to do it on the web. People hated these big banners. They didn't want to be, you can much more easily skip a page in a newspaper than have to flip another page on the screen. So they came up with another idea of micro-targeted advertising. We will show you advertisement that match your individual preferences. And for this, they scrape enormous amount of information. We have no idea what information they have and where do they collect it. A few years ago, there was a leak. Turns out that every time you use your credit card, Google gets the information. Because somewhere in the agreement for the credit card, in the small letters, it says that they can sell this information to third parties. So they collect enormous amount of information. So there was some article, they did experiment. If you ask the simple query, what is Exxon? What kind of advertisement you're going to see? So if Google thinks that you are a liberal, they'll show you an advertisement about CO2 capture, carbon capture. Nice cloud, beautiful sky. But if Google thinks you're conservative, they'll show you advertisement about anti-regulation. So you see the advertisement that Google thinks are a good fit for you. And this became known as surveillance capitalism. In Silicon Valley, they say, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So you think you're getting something for free. There's no free lunch. And Shoshana Zuboff, this is a big book, like 700 pages book. If you don't want to read the whole book, I encourage you to read an article that she wrote in January 21, just shortly after the January 6th insurrection. And she wrote, the coup we're not talking about. She wrote, we can have democracy or we can have surveillance society, but we cannot have both. Now, Facebook learned from Google, but took it to the next level. Google is about showing you the right advertisements. But you can say, I don't look at advertisements. I'm just ignoring advertisement. Of course, they also show you the search result today are ranked according to your preference. If you heard about the page algorithm, they don't use it anymore. They show you the search ranking is according to your preference. But Facebook went a step farther. the content that you see is the content that, that Facebook wants you to see. And what is their goal? Maximize user engagement. So they're creating an addictive product, and people have looked at it. It's called addiction by design. And people have, for example, you get a like. This was a devilish invention. You get a like, you get a tiny bit of social approval. We all crave social approval. People put a picture on Facebook, they go back to see how many likes did I get, how many likes did I get. So you come back and again and again. And Nir Eyal wrote a whole book about this. It's called Hooked. And how to build habit-forming product. Essentially, habit-forming is just a nicer way than to say addictive products. And then in an interview in 2019, when the issue of regulation came up, he said, no, individuals should be able to control themselves, okay? It's like the people who sell drugs to say, well, it's your problem. You decided to buy drugs. So now we go back to the sandhip paradox. How do you give up your privacy? You give your privacy one click at a time. And you think, okay, I like this, I like that. How much information does it reveal? Each one is just one grain of sand. But the internet companies have learned how to take all these clicks and likes and create from this a sand heap of information about us. They know a lot about us, more than we know. We have no idea how much they know about us. And what do they do is what they know about us. They try to influence us via advertising, via content. The poet John Donne wrote, "No man is an island entirely of itself. Every man is a piece of continent, a part of the main. Our decisions are always influenced by the social context." For example, there was something called subliminal advertising, where advertisement that the volume is so low that you may not hear it consciously. And people hate it, because it means they feel manipulated. Well, that's what's happening now when you use the internet. You're being manipulated. And even Spinoza said, men are mistaken in thinking themselves free. Their opinion is made up of consciousness of their own action, and ignorance of the causes by which they are determined. We're influenced, and we refuse to recognize that we're influenced. And it was revealed by the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where Cambridge Analytica was a company that figured out how to harvest lots and lots of information from Facebook. And using them, they had 10,000 different advertisements, which they tailored to users. And there are good reasons to think they've influenced the election in this decisive way, because the 2016 election was decided by about 107,000 people in just Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And it was a tiny change in number of votes, but it will never know decisively. But if this advertising campaign was able to change 107,000 votes, then that may have decided the election. And this is the picture here of, you see, remember what do they call, the shaman from the January 6th insurrection, and this is, they put Zuckerberg face there. Washington Post, a review of millions of posts showed that Facebook played a critical role in spreading false narrative that fomented violence that day. So this is, again, remember I took the sand heap paradox, this is the sand heap of influence. The current situation is everybody is saying that social media, the way it is today, is very problematic. And even the whole bunch of quotes here of tech CEOs saying it's time for some regulation. In fact, they are saying they're in favor of regulation because they're convinced it's coming and they want to influence it. They want to make sure that they have a say in what kind of regulation is coming. But there is a sense of regulation is coming. Of course, the challenge is for Congress to be able to, we're so polarized today that Congress has a hard time passing anything. And regulation is going to be difficult. It's not easy, clear how to regulate, okay? So there are all kinds of questions. How to, I gave once a talk in Romania, and I talk about regulation. They start laughing. They says, more regulation just means more bribery. Okay, you have to good governance for regulation to work. US and Europe are taking different approaches. Some regulation may require international treaties Not going to be so easy. The big question is big tech too big? Is it time to split them? For example, there is a proposal to take Facebook and split it to one company that just is just the repository. Another company moderates the content. And so Facebook will have to open the API. And I can say, I don't like Facebook's moderation. I want to buy Sampath had to open another content moderation company. And I hear that he's doing a pretty good job, so I want to use his moderation company other than Facebook moderation engine. And the big dilemma there, I call it the social trilemma. So what happened? If you have no moderation, then we know all kind of bad speech proliferates on the internet. Do we want the companies to decide who can speak? Do we want to have the government decide? So there's three solutions, right? The government decides, the company decides, or no one decides. We don't like any of these options. And now we go back to the Vienna Circle. Another member of the Vienna Circle, just a couple of years older than Gödel, was Karl Raimund Popper. He was the defender of liberal democracy. And he published a book in 1945, The Open Society and Its Enemies. And what he learned from Gödel, from Gödel's incomplete result, wasn't so much about self-reference, but absolutism. Absolute truth leads to contradiction. And he realized this is also true for other kind of absolute things. He said, if you have unlimited tolerance, then you tolerate suppression of tolerance. Okay? So how much do you tolerate? If you have people today that are going to, we all are for free speech. How would you feel to have a speaker on campus that would now openly advocate re-enslaving black people? We all said, no, this is outrageous, beyond the realm. We not tolerate this kind of speech, okay? We won't take it further, let's kill the Jews, okay? We all said, no, unacceptable. So unlimited tolerance is a problem. If you have total freedom, that's become the law of the jungle. The strong will oppress the weak. That's total freedom. To protect the weak, we have to suppress to some extent the strong. We have too much democracy. We can allow the majority decides for tyrants to rule. I think Popper is now laughing in his grave at us. And I would formulate my version of this. Too much speech leads to curtailment of speech. People said, more speech is, the solution to bad speech is more speech and more speech. I don't think it's true. Some are assuming that more is always better. I don't know if this is true. How do we find the balance there? It's a very difficult question. And I want to finish with an observation about technology. So fire was the first technology that we discovered. And in fact, it's probably the oldest technology, and it shaped us. Just look at what Homo neanderthal looked like. Big jaws, because you have to chew a lot. We have these tiny jaws because we have cooked food. We don't have to chew so much. So the story was that, I remember the story was that Prometheus, who stole the fire from the god, was punished that an eagle come and eat his liver every night, and then during the day the liver grows again, or maybe at night it grows again. So he gets his liver eaten every day. But there is another story that I didn't realize until recently was related, and this is the story of Pandora's box. So part of the punishment that gods inflicted on humans because they took the fire, they sent Pandora with a box of gifts. And when she opened the gift, all kind of plagues and pestilence and hunger and war, everything comes out of that. So the Greeks were trying to tell us, you get technology, there are always adverse consequences. There's no free lunch. You get technology, but you're going to pay the price. Edward Wilson, who was a very distinguished biologist, said the true problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and technology of gods. So I want to rephrase it a little bit. I would say today's technology is taking advantage of our Paleolithic emotions and medieval institutions. And to look at this whole big question of technology, culture, and society, there's a little self-promotion. We are organizing in December 5, 6 at Rice University a conference, a 2-day conference on technology, culture, and society. And it's open. You're all invited to attend. Registration fee is nominal. Students are invited to submit posters. So take a look, Technology Council and Society at Rice University. If you can find it, then just send me email, and I'll be happy to send you the pointer. At this point, I'll close, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Professor Vardi will take questions now. I'll allow you to.
Everybody in full agreement? This is boring. Somebody should disagree. Yes, samples. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I thought one way you would take this talk would be that the change to logic coming from technology, because zero knowledge proofs and interactive proofs are interacting over the internet and so on, how it's affecting the fundamental notion of proof. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
We can touch. This is trying to. Whenever you give a 1 hour talk, it's like preparing a movie. When you prepare a movie, some of the best scenes are left on what's called on the floor of the editing room. Yes, in fact, you can take it away. So one of the conclusions from here is maybe the mistake was taking logic to be absolute. So maybe we should have a logic. All the way people have tried to soften the concept of logic, soften the concept of truth, fuzzy logic, multi-valued logic. There's a whole bunch of attempts to deal with it. I think computer science has brought in new dimension to the question of what is a proof. So if the essence of a proof, so we have been trained to think that the proof is a step-by-step deduction. But this is when proofs were done manually, so to speak. Once we are liberated from that, and we're saying we're allowing computers to help us with that, we take it in different direction. For example, another direction is mathematicians are saying, some proofs are so complicated, they cannot trust them anymore. Some proofs are kind of monster. The monster theorem from group theory, classification of finite simple groups, is 5,000 pages when you put all the papers together. Nobody can really comprehend the whole thing. And so the idea is now some people are really taking the concept of computable checkable proof to formulate the whole proof inside one of these what they call proof assistants. So I think there's a whole talk about the relationship between computer science and proofs, either by the concept of actually mechanizing mathematical proofs, but also bringing in other concepts. If it's computable evidence, what is evidence? Does it have to be absolutely true? Are you satisfied by 0.99999? There's a whole other dimension you can kind of bring into that. Yeah. Yes.
So you just mentioned recently, how technology has impacted negatively some of our political and cultural systems. So I guess on the converse, what are some ways that technology and logic can be used to improve our political system?
So I think there are of course, technology has been used in many, many, many positive ways, right? Most of us are using technology now, just the ability to find your way. There was a concept of getting lost. Okay, don't get lost anymore, okay? I'm old enough to remember getting lost, okay? The students here, they have no idea. What does it mean to get lost? What does it mean? Never cannot happen, right? Think about it. You lost a huge experience of what does it mean to get lost. We still are using in English. We tell someone, get lost. You ask someone, what does it mean to get lost? Think of what happened today people are expecting really technology to have kind of revolution in medicine, to be able to diagnose things today. There was some fear of AI just completely making radiologists irrelevant anymore. But what we have seen is actually radiologists with computers are much better than computers alone or radiologists alone. So there are many, many cases where we can hope to use technology. Think of the way, even we have the pandemic started in March 2020, blew up in March 2020. By January, we had a vaccine. This was incredibly fast. When it started, what I knew, it takes 5 years to generate a vaccine, to come up with a vaccine for a new virus. But this was something completely new. This was mRNA vaccine. And we used, remember the Genome Project from 2000? We're going to personalized medicine, well, did not really work as promised. But we did learn to sequence very fast. And so whole mRNA technology, and we sequence today using algorithms. There's a whole approach, technical approach was developed of using computing to do the sequencing. And so computers have many, many, many positive uses. I mean, the point is it's always a two-edged sword. And, fire. I mean, how many people here have eaten raw steak? I'm vegetarian, so don't ask me. But I can imagine that raw steak is not very tasty. On the other hand, people still die from fire. Fire is still a horrible thing. So nothing comes for free, okay? So the question is for us is part of how to navigate technology is to benefit the technology while trying to minimize its adverse impact. And we do it for many things. Every time you take a medication, there can be complications. And we try to walk on this thin line of benefiting while minimizing adverse impacts. Rajiv, did you have a question?
Well, it was, along the same lines, but what can we do to actually make sure that new things don't have adverse effects?
So one is that I think as technologists, we have been very naive. We means me too. I mean, I don't have necessarily had more insight. Our field was very, very naive. If you look at other fields, take for example, the chemists had their moment of truth in World War I, chemical weapons, which was horrifying. The physicists had their moment of truth in World War II, atomic weapons, nuclear weapons. The biologists started thinking about it in 75. They had the Asilomar conference, in which before there was genetic engineering, they started saying, let's look at what could happen, and they wrote some statement of principle about this. We thought, we're just hackers. We're just playing with computers here. We never realized what happened when you take technology and you scale it up to human dimensions, to society. You have suddenly billions of users. We never thought about that impact. Well, now we know. So now we need to think about every time now Mark Zuckerberg is proposing the metaverse. I'm scared, okay? Because I know what motivates Mark Zuckerberg. More data from us, more money for him, okay? So let's take the writer, any technology that somebody comes up, let's take the writers of Black Mirror and ask them to come up with some scenarios. In fact, Wired magazine, I think it was last year, had a review of the next season of Black Mirror, and they complained. They said Black Mirror used to be dystopian. Now it's become a reality show. So, I mean, I don't know that we are the best one to come up with, you need kind of a red team. I'm not sure that we computer scientists, we don't have a deep understanding how society will react. Sometimes people who are doing this kind of scenario writing, science fiction writers, they might do a better job in telling, let's imagine what can go wrong. We have not been doing this. Let's imagine what would go wrong. This is something that's not in our culture. I think we need to do that. I mean, if you look at if you become a doctor, what's the first thing you have to do? There is an oath, right? First, do no harm. We've not internalized it. Our products can be incredibly useful. They can save lives, but can also do harm. And I would say it's not part of our culture. It's not part of our education. That yes, we have a powerful tool. It can do good. It can do evil. How to do it? We are involved. We are not helpless actors here. We are involved. Yes.
How should society approach artificial intelligence and advances in that field in terms of effects on society?
So this is the kind of part of the general questions of which is how to regulate technology. So some people will tell you, well, the free market does a good job of regulating things. So first of all, the free market is a misleading term. Why it's a misleading term? Because the free market is a set of mechanisms that much was developed by society. For example, I get mortgage from the bank. Suppose I fall behind on my payments. The bank will foreclose on my house. Who will kick me out of the house? the sheriff, the government will come and kick me out of my house. Suddenly free market, because people say, wait a minute, do you want the companies to hire some goons to kick me out of the house? And I will then organize a whole neighborhood to attack the goons? It's going to be a jungle out there. So the free market it's a mechanism that society designed. Limited liability corporations. Why do we give them limited liability? Because we thought it's a useful thing for society to say basically the shareholders are only responsible for their investment in the company, in the corporation, and not more than that. Not more than that, okay? On the other hand, if I have a car and I cause an accident, I'm not only liable up to the value of the car, right? I can have to pay $1 million if I cause, even it's my, if I drink and drive and I kill someone, I'll have to pay millions of dollars. I don't have limited liability. Why should corporations have limited liability? Again, because society thought this makes sense. Okay? So now the free market does well certain things, it doesn't do certain things, it doesn't do very well. In fact, we basically said, kidney transplant is the free market? No, we said, that's poor people will end up selling their kidneys. We don't want that to happen. So ultimately, there is a societal decision what to leave to the free market and what not to leave to the free market. And we learn something from experience. We allow certain things to happen, and then we say, no, this is a bad idea. Let's not do that. And it goes into politics, we debate, people have different opinions. I think we'll have big debates about how much of this AI to leave to companies and how much should the government is, you have to remember, people talk about the government. I have news for you guys. You are the government. Now, it's not a direct thing. Nobody here, I don't think we have anything here who is the president, but we built a system by which we have a collective voice. Is it perfect? It's very far from perfect. But as letting some we have 5 huge corporations with market equity today of about $10 trillion. Are we content to leave them to make big decisions about our lives? That's ultimately a political decision. Speak up, you're at the back.
You talked about the danger of having basically like laws of the jungle and the fact that when it comes to like misinformation without regulation, you can have like dangerous consequences like what we saw with the election. But I'm also curious your thoughts on kind of the other side to the danger of having like a ministry of truth that sometimes gets the questions wrong. Like for example, there's been cases where fact checkers labeled something as misinformation and then it turns out to be more accurate. But how do you kind of balance, yes, there's like a need for a certain regulation with the fact that like nobody kind of has all the answers or like the objective truth?
So that's why I mentioned it as a social trilemma, because there are 3 options, and I don't like either of them. So one was Minister of Truth decide what is true. I don't like it. One is Facebook decide what is true. I don't like it. Anything goes. I don't like it either. So the only solution that I see now for this is to give me more choice. And what I mean by that is right now, Facebook has a monopoly. There's only one Facebook. There's no serious competition. Google tried to compete with them. They didn't succeed. Google Plus, they had to bury it. Okay, it was not successful. So they are a monopoly. But they also mean they have a monopoly in terms of content moderation. What we can do is force them to open their API. Okay? If they open their API, they serve the content, open API, but I can now subscribe to another content moderator. Okay? And maybe the other content moderator will do better, I can tailor it. Maybe I want to see more nudity. Okay, right now, I mean, Facebook decides what nudity is allowed. So there was a period in which I kept getting friends requests that you look at them for 2 seconds. It's very clear to you that this is some sort of prostitution behind it. And I got pissed off. So I put some of these requests, I put it on my Facebook and tell Facebook, I tagged Facebook. I said, stop it. So what happened? Now they blocked me because I'm using inappropriate content on Facebook, which is content, of course, that they sent me in the first place. So the point is, we have no choice right now. You are captive. There is really only, people have tried to do other kind of social media. There is something called MeWe, which turns out has no moderation. It's actually worse. So this is one of the major questions to society. How to moderate speech. And if you look where it happens outside of Facebook, what happens if let's suppose you send New York Times a Nazi op-ed. New York Times have editorial discretion. They say, no, we're not going to publish it. We're going to try the Washington Post. They're not going to publish it. You may find at some point some small newspaper somewhere in the country that will publish it. It will be read by about 50 people. But on the platform, you have a huge megaphone, okay? And there's recommendation engines. We know that the recommendation, like YouTube, for example, you watch one thing. They say, oh, you like this. I'll show you another. And we know that this gets to people radicalized. In either way, they can be radicalized left or right or up or down. They can be radicalized in some way. So the point is we have no control. We like the platform, but we have no choice about the content moderation. That's what we need. I think if we open it up, in fact, to me, it's a free market solution. Let's open it up. Let's have competition. Let's see what happens. Will it be a perfect solution? I don't know, but let's give it a try. Yeah.
So in the world that you are suggesting, where we are allowed to opt in to different competing content moderation platforms, what stops there being, dare I say, Texas Facebook and California Facebook? And wouldn't that just accelerate the trends of polarization and spread of misinformation instead of doing anything to actually curtail it and stop the general trends that are leading to this kind of societal conflict?
But Facebook is already showing you the stuff that they think you want to see, okay? I'm hoping that if you allow me, I want to have a content moderator that shows me, that gives me more choice. It doesn't try to maximize my engagement. I mean, right now the problem is because it's all, we all like free things, okay? Imagine that City of Philadelphia decided to subsidize ice cream. Everybody should have right to an ice cream. And they open lots of ice cream kiosks around the city, free ice cream. What do you think is going to happen? People are going to overconsume ice cream, right? It's free, why not? Facebook gives us the illusion of free things. And then it gives us content to maximize user engagement. No wonder people are overusing it. So in a class at Rice, we did an exercise called device abstinence, in which we're asking students to avoid using all devices for 24 hours. And then they have to write an essay, what was the experience. And just to show you how out of touch I am, I thought we'll get essays saying, oh my goodness, I got 24 hours of peace and quiet. I could go, take walks, smell the flowers, enjoy the blue sky. I was completely off. All the essays were over the forum. I was so miserable. I can't take a walk because I'll get lost. And I can't go with a friend because I have no way of contacting my friends. I have no idea how to reach them otherwise. And in fact, when people wrote about their experience, I looked at it and I said, oh my God. And then I looked at withdrawal symptoms 101. And you saw they were just one-to-one match. Okay? We're all addicted to this technology. And I think, first of all, we need to figure out how to do it in a way. And, I have an idea of this unbundling it, but, we are all creative thinkers. Think of a way that would reduce our dependence. And this, I said there's only one Facebook right now. So we're all incredibly dependent on this technology, and what Facebook decides to show us. This is, to me, a scary part. Mark Zuckerberg deciding what you're going to see. And it was known by, we have I think it was about a year ago, there was the Facebook papers that were leaked. And it turned out Facebook knew about all kinds of adverse impacts. And there were internal proposals what to do about it. But every such proposal was going to have some impact on the profitability of Facebook. And so they all were shut down. None of them was accepted.
I really like the idea of open APIs for things, but I guess what I've never been able to figure out for myself is how you structure the
Which one?
Internet Relay Chat, IRC.
Yeah.
It was basically Slack, but it was an open protocol that was invented in 1989.
Yeah.
And then Slack came along, like, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And IRC hadn't developed because it was just hobbyists on the internet who built things. And now we have Slack, which doesn't really do anything new at all. It's a closed ecosystem, this company making a profit. And I mean, where is the middle ground there that you see? Like, how do you have incentive structures that lead to a thriving ecosystem that doesn't suffer this problem of open standards, IRC or email?
So let's try to, I see people have to leave, so let's try to close it here, answer this question. So this is actually where usually the free market is pretty good at discovering, people come up with ideas and they are discovering certain things. The thing that suppresses the free market, what suppresses this entrepreneurship? Either government regulations, we don't have this problem right now, we're not being suppressed by government regulation, monopolies. Monopolies suppress innovations, we know that. Okay? So this is one argument. In fact, when people look at inflation, one argument is there has been huge concentration of market power in the market, not just in technology, but in many other areas as well. So we need to look, why aren't we seeing more innovation there? And the suspicion is it's because of monopoly. And this is, we have laws, antitrust laws, the Sherman Law, Sherman Act, and we need to open the market for innovation, to remove barriers to innovation. Because right now we don't have enough innovation there. So I don't have the ideas. I want all of us to be able to compete, to somebody think, here is how I can make money. Here is another incentive structure. You know, we've gotten used to this free thing, and a free thing is not free. Because where does Google and Facebook get their money? From advertisers. Where do advertisers get the money? They put it on the products. Who pays for these products? We pay for the products. So in some sense, what happened is now the income of Google and Facebook is a hidden tax on all of us. We just don't see it. But every time you buy anything, advertising cost is built in. So you are paying for it. Okay? So the question is, to me, is there is monopoly, and that's, first of all, we need to tackle the monopoly, and then hopefully the free market will do what it's good at. It will encourage entrepreneurship and competition and creativity, inventing incentive, inventing new business model. When everything is free, it's very hard to someone to compete. If somebody comes and says, okay, I'll give you a better search engine, but you'll have to pay for it $10 a month. You know, people don't want to pay $10 a month. Okay, last question.
Yes, with monopolism, historically, obviously, the oil monopolies broke it up, and some oil wells went to one company and some oil wells went to the new one. Like, I think the ways people have advocated for breaking up some of Facebook is WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook, all three different companies. But I think it doesn't even solve the problem that those actually don't monopolies. So is there a new way we have to actually implement antitrust?
Is there a new what?
Is there a new way we have to implement antitrust, in your opinion, to actually break these companies up in a better way than
So,
of old?
there are two, I mean, the barriers for this is that first of all, you have, I mean, this is a self-defeating. You have to have bipartisan agreement to pass anything now. Because the Democrats have majority in the House, who knows for how long, and they have a very, very slim majority in the Senate, so you see almost very little thing happen today. Because it's just hard to pass anything. You need really something of bipartisan agreement. You know, I think that, I mean, trying to bust monopolies should be something over which there should be partisan agreement, because monopolies are really against the free market. The free market depends on competition. The monopolies suppress competitions. But I have to say right now, you know, you have to have political will. You have to have a functional parliament to do that. We have lots of barriers for us that how to not just come up with a plan, but basically how to do this. So I would say that short term, I'm not an optimist, but longer term, I'm hoping that people will see that we have right now a very lopsided market, and we need to really, the free market is not functional when you have such lopsided market. So people who think that I'm a socialist, no, I want more free market. I want more competition, more entrepreneurship, more innovation. Thank you all very much.